This week, the foreperson of the Georgia special grand jury investigating former President Donald Trump in the 2020 election did several interviews. And while she didn't name any names, she did hint they recommended multiple indictments. Joining me now is Chuck Todd, moderator of NBC's Meet the Press. So, Chuck, what did you make of the media tour the foreperson did, which was definitely different? And could former President Trump's team use this to their advantage?
It was head-scratching, and it certainly gives the Trump defense team something to try and use to essentially, whether it's get the indictments thrown out, say there's a mistrial, say the jury pool's poison. I don't know if it'll be successful, but she certainly, these interviews have given them something to use to object if a new grand jury is impaneled and indictments happen. My guess is the district attorney, Ms. Willis, is probably wishing the foreperson didn't do this. I'm guessing the judge is wishing the foreperson didn't do this. But there was no law against it. They were done, and this is what made this entire special grand jury report, I think, a precarious thing to do, right? Which is they wanted to see if they had a case. I think the DAs found out they have a case, but now you have to go to another grand jury to do this. It's certainly they've put the case at risk, and I think the foreperson's put the case at risk. Whether it does kill it, I think we don't know for sure, but I think it's fair to say it's put the entire thing at risk.
Sunday on Meet the Press, you will speak with both National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan as well as Alaska Senator Dan Sullivan, who is serving on the Armed Forces Committee. It's the one-year anniversary of the Russian invasion of Ukraine, and we are seeing new sanctions on Russia, plus a peace plan floated from China. So what's the feeling in Washington on where this war is now and where it's heading?
Well, on one hand, I think that certainly the Biden administration feels as if our Ukraine policy is working, and that so far things have been successful, right? Because Russia didn't win in the first year, and they're losing, and they've had to change their goals in this war, and that's because the West's support of Ukraine is working. But the question is, are we supporting Ukraine enough to essentially hold off the Russians? Or are we giving them enough to actually win this war? And I think that's what the next 6 months, I think we're going to find out. Are we doing enough for them to win this war? I can tell you there's a lot of a growing chorus now of Democrats who are very supportive of Ukraine, who believe the administration's not moving fast enough. Whether it's F-16s, whether it's more weapons, that, the goal is not to just help Ukraine survive. At this point, the goal is to make sure Ukraine wins this war, because anything less only creates more problems around the globe.
Chuck, here in Georgia, it has now been 6 days since we heard the news of former President Jimmy Carter going into hospice care. Looking at his long career, there's a lot to talk about with his presidency, certainly, but also many layers to his post-presidential life as well.
It's an enormous amount. I've been, obviously, a lot of us have been doing a lot of thinking, a lot of researching, a lot of talking to people about his presidency and his post-presidency. And there's sort of two, I think, amazing aspects to Jimmy Carter's legacy. Number one is there's not a single other president in the 20th century who truly you could say was a citizen president. He didn't come from a political machine. He didn't come from some political elites. It wasn't sort of somebody who was incubated and sort of, this person's going to be president someday, run for Congress, run for this, do this. He really did it his own way, and he really was sort of, in the way he ran his campaign for president. He brought a pillow and a blanket and stayed at supporters' houses. So you had that. And then his presidential legacy, post-presidential legacy, he used his platform not to make money. A lot of former presidents have gone ahead and given speeches to make a lot of money. Not to say that he hasn't used his platform to raise money to fund his efforts at the Carter Center and things like that. But I do think he provided quite the blueprint for any future former president of how you can use that platform. You sort of get handed this celebrity influencer platform, and you can use it however way you want to use it. And he chose to use it to try to deal with human rights and give people homes. And he did it for 40 years, and he always did it with a smile on his face. So I think that in that aspect, it's amazing that his post-presidential legacy in some ways overshadows his presidency. But, that post-presidential legacy is quite impressive.
And he certainly has left a lasting legacy there. Chuck, I do want to ask you one final question here. After a bit of a social media campaign, which included an appeal from a former Georgia player, the White House invited the national championship Bulldogs to the White House. Chuck, it's no surprise that the Georgia fan base was passionate about getting their team there, but what do you make of all of that?
They weren't invited. It took a campaign to get him invited. I didn't understand how it wasn't an automatic invite.
Well, I think that's what a lot of folks are wondering.
Yeah, that's a head scratcher a little bit. I know that, we're still the White House is still sort of shaking off the COVID cobwebs a little bit. So getting teams to come in, and they haven't had the big college teams come in and do it before. But that's a head scratcher. And I'm going to be really politically cynical here, especially when you're talking about the most favored football team and perhaps the single most important battleground state in American politics. Just saying.
Very good point there, Chuck. Thank you so much, as always. Meet the Press airs Sunday morning at 10 on 11 Alive. Chuck, it's good to be with you again.